I'm going to go right here.
Do you think that there needs to be an Insurrection Act invoked?
Oh, I think that the president has that opportunity in the future. It's his constitutional right, and it's up to him if he wants to utilize it.
Do you think he's likely to do it?
I don't know.
But if he does would it lead to more deadly killings in Minnesota if the Insurrection Act is invoked?
If anything doesn't change with Governor Walz, I don't anticipate that the streets will get any safer or more peaceful. Governor Walz and his leadership team need to come to us and find out how we can work together like we have in many other states. We didn't see this kind of reaction in Louisiana when we ran our operations exactly how we are running them in Minneapolis. But we had a very different response because we had leaders that were working with us. If you saw our operations in Florida, extremely successful. In Minneapolis so far, we brought hundreds of criminals off the streets that were dangerous to society and dangerous to that community. We would wish that Governor Walz could take an example from the governor of Louisiana, the governor of Florida, and work with us to do the right thing for his people.
Your officers are dealing with more and more protesters. Do you think they need more de-escalation training, though, given some of the scenarios we have seen videos of interactions?
You know, the officers that we have out there are very highly trained and skilled, specific for the operations that they're doing. They're utilizing the most gifted individuals on these operations to go out and to do enforcement, because many times if they're going after murderers, they're going after professionals and gangs and terrorists that are here in our country illegally. And I'll remind you, the only reason we're in this situation is because the Biden administration allowed 20 million people to come into this country unvetted. My every day is spent thinking about the known terrorists that are in this country that I just haven't found yet. The suspected terrorists, the criminals, the murderers, the pedophiles that are out there on the streets that we need to find and get off the streets because Joe Biden opened up our borders and allowed that invasion to happen. If you can imagine the kind of dysfunctional criminal gangs and organizations that use that open border as an opportunity to infiltrate America, it's overwhelming at times. And that's why President Trump is so strong at taking action and making sure he's in every single state following through on his commitments to every single citizen.
Did the president say what his final straw would be to invoke the Insurrection Act if he did?
No, this president uses all the information and intelligence that he can get. That's why he calls me, he calls Pete, he calls local law enforcement. He talks to those individuals and agents as well that are involved that he knows well. This president makes fully informed decisions and utilizes his authorities when it's appropriate.
Marina Machado is coming to the White House today. Are you going to be in the meeting because a lot of illegals are from Venezuela? Or are you going to talk with Delcy Rodriguez like Trump?
I think I have other commitments today. We are putting in the new commandant of the Coast Guard. He is having his swearing-in ceremony, so I'll be doing that. And then I have some meetings with law enforcement. So I will not be in that meeting, but the president will keep me informed.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Have a good number 2 at ICE.
All right, you've been listening to the DHS Secretary Kristi Noem at a very busy time. She said that there is no plans to pull out of Minnesota. She said she has been discussing invoking the Insurrection Act with the president and said that he has every right to do so, but that it's ultimately up to him. She also made some unsubstantiated claims that Governor Walz was complicit in fraud in Minnesota, as well as saying that Joe Biden let in 20 million undocumented immigrants. That is an exaggerated number, not based on the data available, and our Daniel Dell has done a fact check on that. But she also said that in every encounter, ICE agents have done exactly what they should do under the law, and that these are targeted operations and that everything is done correctly. And she was asked, I believe it was by NBC's Peter Alexander, if when these ICE agents go up to protesters and ask for their papers, whether that is considered a targeted operation and whether people should be bringing their papers with them and their ID. And she said, yes, U.S. citizens should be prepared to provide proof. So I want to bring in Ellie Honig to get some more context and perspective on what we just heard from the DHS secretary. You know, Ellie, we were just talking about yesterday protected First Amendment activity. And so I wonder what you make of the DHS secretary's claim there that when these ICE agents go up to protesters and ask for their papers, that is all above board, and that Americans should bring their papers with them to show proof.
Well, Pam, that's wrong. It's illegal and it's unconstitutional to require people to show their citizenship papers without some other basis to make a stop. So let me be clear. In order to stop somebody, detain them, question them for immigration purposes, an officer has to have reasonable suspicion. Now, that's a fairly low bar. It's lower than the bar that a law enforcement agent would need to make a stop or questioning for criminal purposes, but it's still a bar. It's not nothing. In fact, just a few months ago, in September of 2025, Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote a concurring opinion in a Supreme Court case when he reiterated that, yes, immigration agents do have to have reasonable suspicion to stop somebody, to detain them, even briefly, and to question them. So what you cannot do is just go arbitrarily up to people or set up a checkpoint or go door to door and say, hey, you need to prove to us that you're a U.S. citizen. The immigration officer needs to have some reasonable suspicion, articulable, meaning something you can explain in words to a court. Why did you stop this person? And Justice Kavanaugh gave immigration officers very broad latitude to do that. But even he reconfirmed just a few months ago that there is a bar. You have to show reasonable suspicion. You cannot just arbitrarily approach people and make them prove that they are, in fact, here legally.
Well, let me just follow up on that, because you heard the DHS secretary say, well, if someone is standing there around a targeted operation or an arrest, that these agents have every right to ask for their ID and their papers. I mean, does that justify a reasonable suspicion if someone is standing there around an operation?
That is quite a stretch. Why would standing around an ICE operation tend to indicate that somebody is in this country illegally? I think that'd be a really hard one to justify in the court. And look, Justice Kavanaugh said it was controversial. Justice Kavanaugh actually said immigration officers, it's okay for them to look at things like the color of the person's skin, the language the person is speaking, where they are, if they're at a Home Depot or a car wash. So even if you allow that level of breadth in determining reasonable suspicion, how would standing around an ICE operation be any indicator of where a person's from or what their immigration status is?
Yeah, basically, she was saying that everyone, U.S. citizens, non-citizens, everyone should walk around with documentation, who they are, ID, and if they're citizens, their citizenship papers or their passport, for example. That's a pretty huge demand. Of the American people right now. But there's another huge development that's breaking right now, and I want to get your legal assessment. If the President of the United States invokes what's called the Insurrection Act, he would be able to deploy military forces to any city in the United States, and he would be able to activate the state National Guard troops as well, right?
Yeah, well, so the key thing to understand about the Insurrection Act is it is extremely broad, and it gives the president very broad discretion and authority. In fact, it's been criticized for many, many years for exactly that. The Insurrection Act allows the president, even if a governor does not want it, allows a president to activate the military, not just the National Guard, but the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, in either of basically two situations. One, if the president determines that there's an insurrection or rebellion, but two, way more broadly, if the president determines that it's necessary to enforce federal laws and to protect the civil rights or constitutional rights of civilians. So that second clause can mean almost anything, and that's why there's been concern about the breadth and scope of this Insurrection Act for a very long time. But the most important thing to understand, you don't actually need an insurrection as a normal person might understand that word. You don't need a rebellion in order to invoke the Insurrection Act. It gives the president the authority to call out the military to conduct law enforcement, which ordinarily they cannot do if the president